Hello and welcome to another episode of Video Game Reviews. Here on the channel I tend to cover a lot of indie games, but today I'm going to be talking about The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening on the Nintendo Switch. In case you're not aware, Link's Awakening was first released on the original Game Boy. This is obviously a remake with a new coat of paint and some other additional features. So let's start with the presentation. I love the new look, and it has been pretty widely praised, though these things can of course be subjective, so there are probably those who don't care for it as much. And that's fine, different strokes for different folks. But continuing with the presentation then, the music and sound effects are on point, of course. It's a Zelda game, and if there's one thing Zelda has never really struggled with, it would be the audio, with the arguable exception of the incredibly popular Breath of the Wild, which opted for a decidedly more ambient soundscape, which, some people thought, that worked really well for that. I felt like something was missing, but I've got a review on that game. If you want to go check that out, it's there. But back to Link's Awakening, this remake features what is possibly my favorite version ever of the original Zelda theme, and I don't say that lightly at all. The Zelda theme is, of course, one of the most iconic and inspiring musical themes in all of video gaming. And it serves, and has always served, to greatly enhance the overall perception of the game's sense of heroism, adventure, and determination in the face of pretty abysmal odds. Because Zelda is, and almost always has been, a story of one kid who is honestly way too young for this burden, and he's equipped at the start with just the clothes on his back and a crappy wooden shield against literally all of the evils of the world. And the crazy thing is, if you're good enough, the kid actually wins. Goosebumps. Freaking goosebumps. Why does this simple premise hit me so powerfully? And I've got some thoughts on that, which I'm not going to delve into here because it's already going to be probably a somewhat longer episode. Obviously I'm not alone in that, because Zelda is huge. Of course, the controls are also on point. As with most first-party Nintendo games, you just kind of take for granted that the controls are going to be responsive and handle as you think they should. Although I will say, they did leave a lot of buttons, quite a few buttons on the controller unused, and I see an opportunity, and to be fair, I've heard other reviewers say this as well, but it's just true. I just see an opportunity, you've got so many items in your inventory, it would be nice if you could have mapped some of those other items to some of the buttons that are just sitting there unused. But, that's whatever, that's not a huge deal. However, do not be lulled into thinking that this review is all about heaping praise on this game. It's not. Like I said, I love the presentation, but generally speaking, I love the presentation, but I do have some other issues with Link's Awakening, and that's, it's not really exclusive to this remake. That goes back to the original Game Boy edition of Link's Awakening as well. And generally speaking, I love 2D Zelda games. Huge fan. That's where I started. But I honestly have always thought that Link's Awakening was an interesting choice for a remake, as I never really liked it. I consider it to be one of the weaker 2D Zelda games. Maybe the weakest, but definitely among the weakest. There's a few reasons for that too, and it's just a departure in what are, for me, some ways that don't really work. It just feels less epic to me, and yes, I understand that it was originally a Game Boy game, but I'm not talking so much about the size of the world map or anything like that, but more so about the premise. Just doesn't feel very epic to me, and I will get into that because it's downright bizarre. Like, it's maybe one of the stranger stories in all of video games, really. So there is no Triforce here. There's no Triforce in this game, and mild spoiler alert, there is no Ganon in this game as your worthy adversary, which, like, he basically always has been, like, a very iconic worthy adversary for this great adventure, and he's just not here, or at least not explicitly. I guess, like, potentially you could just read into some things, maybe. I don't know. But rather, you are in Link's Awakening, and I swear I'm not making this up, you are collecting musical instruments so that you can play a song to a flying fish and thereby wake it up. The reason that you have to do this is because the island that you're trapped on and everything in it is, in fact, the dream of this wind fish. So in order to escape, you need to play the magic song to wake up a fish. WTF, bruh. Seriously. That is bizarre, and I would say that's not really epic at all. I mean, it's almost like a spoof of a Zelda game. This is like the Robin Hood Men in Tights, or Spaceballs would be giving it too much credit. This is like the Robin Hood Men in Tights of video games, almost. However, more important than all of that wackiness is the level layouts, the level designs. And honestly, I mostly found the dungeons in this game, and always have, to be annoying rather than rewarding, which should, like, that should be what we're aiming for, right? Like a rewarding experience, not an irritating experience. And this playthrough is actually the first time that I've ever made it all the way through any version of Link's Awakening, because every time I've ever tried to get into this game, you know, or like the original Game Boy version, I'd really enjoy it up through maybe the first few dungeons, and then almost inexplicably I would become, like, suddenly and completely disinterested. Like, I would just set it down, start playing something else, and never come back to it, you know. And then at some point years later, I would ask myself, what, you know, how/why have I never finished this game? I'd pick it up and do exactly the same thing, which, just for the record, is, like, not typical for me at all. I mean, this isn't the only game where that's happened, but it's, like, definitely far from typical. And what's more, that experience that I just described of, like, setting the game down and just walking away from it, like, not out of frustration, just out of, like, a sudden and unexplainable disinterest, that experience isn't even unique to me. I've heard quite a few other people say similar things about it, and here's the thing, even people who like Link's Awakening have said that beyond a certain point, they're just kind of like, okay, let's wrap it up. Which is not really a great sign, because it doesn't even have an excessively long runtime. You know, it's not even like it really shouldn't wear out its welcome. This remake took me about 15 hours to complete. And honestly, if I didn't need to complete it for this review, then I probably would have just shelved it again, as I've done so many multiple times before with the Game Boy version. Nintendo has pretty much always been willing to take some risks with both Mario and Zelda games. Like, there's a certain amount of, you know, formula. Like, there's a certain formulaic element to both of these series. I mean, they'd kind of be stupid not to, because they are so, you know, successful and well-loved. But they are, you know, for such iconic games and characters, they've historically been willing to take, like, reasonably big risks with both of those series. And although I've historically considered myself way more of a Zelda fan than a Mario fan, I have to admit that the risks or changes that Nintendo makes to games in the Mario series tend to land for me much more often than in the Zelda series. And in fact, to be honest with you, and with myself, I'd say that I only really enjoy maybe 50% of the games in the Zelda series, and honestly, maybe like a little bit less than 50%. And honestly, I don't think that that's really all that uncommon. Everyone's got their favorites, and everyone's got the ones that they feel like just don't really belong. And which games those are just seems to vary on the it just varies depending on the person. Also, I have noticed over the years that for many people, their favorite Zelda game tends to be whichever one they played first. Which, I mean, isn't that surprising because of the power of nostalgia, but it's a phenomenon that seems extra prominent with regard to the Legend of Zelda games. Like the ones that people enjoy, like they tend to really enjoy, and the ones that make people scratch their head and say WTF just really throw folks off. Well, anyway, look, Link's Awakening is on the eShop for $60, though I have seen it regularly priced in some stores physically for $50. I've seen it used or on sale in the $35 to $40 range, but honestly, this is a remake of an original Game Boy game. Yes, the updates to the graphics and audio, they're nice, but in my opinion, this should have dropped brand new in maybe $30 or $35. So in closing, regardless of price, I don't really feel like Link's Awakening is worth your time. Though that new coat of paint is nice, and it's almost worth it just for the spectacular version of the Zelda theme song, still, I'd say if you just can't resist it, definitely wait for a sale. Do not pay $60 for a Game Boy game. It's crazy. Anyways, look, I'd really like to thank you for watching, and a big thank you to the 45 people who think my show is worth subscribing to. That makes me feel like my strange compulsion to make these videos is not a complete waste of time. So seriously, thank you. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time, whenever that may be. Bye-bye.